Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. Get Jelaine in here so we can get things started. So as you may know, Interface Fluidics hosts webinars every month or so covering different technologies and research for oil and gas. This month, we'll be diving a little bit deeper into how our tech can help clients in energy reach their ESG goals. It's a timely topic as the International Energy Agency released their yearly report not too long ago, and the 26th UN Climate Change Conference is set to begin in just a few days. Today's topic is meeting ESG goals through microfluidics, reducing freshwater and chemical use in oil and gas. My name is Lee Nelson, and I'm the marketing lead here at Interface Fluidics. I also have a master's degree in energy and sustainability, so I'll be your moderator for today, and I'll be walking us through 3 key ways Interface can help you meet your goals. To cover the technical portion of our talk, we have Jelaine Forson, Technical Account Manager. Her background is in chemical technology with previous work in core flooding laboratories. So she brings a unique insight into how Interface's work is helping to make the industry more efficient. So just a few notes before we get into it. Please post any questions in the Q&A or chat box, and we'll cover them in the session at the end of the webinar. Alternatively, feel free to reach out to us at webinar@interfacefluidics.com. We're also available on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, where you can view past webinars and get daily updates on our technology. Helpful links have been posted in the chat box to your right. Interface Fluidics is facilitating a net zero energy industry and the conservation of finite resources through accurate and cost-effective decision-making in the field. Our technology shows you how fluids behave at the pore scale and provide critical phase information for building computer reservoir models. We help the energy industry cut chemical costs, increase ROI, and take the guesswork out of operations. Smaller samples also mean less energy use and lower emissions. Our lab facilities are located in the National Institute of Nanotechnology in Edmonton, Alberta, and our corporate headquarters are in Calgary. Interface has experience working in many different reservoirs around the world. Our technology allows us to gain insights and provide solutions for fluid flow through porous media, from enhanced oil recovery to frac fluid optimization and regain conductivity. We also offer a suite of PVT and phase behavior analysis, including minimum miscibility pressure and MME, helping facilitate carbon sequestration and gas injection. Other PVT offerings include asphaltene, onset pressure, wax appearance temperature, and bubble and dew point analysis. Dealing with ESG concerns is obviously a very important topic that we could spend a lot of time covering, but today we're going to focus on limiting carbon emissions through CCUS and the reduction of water and chemical use. There's been a lot of talk about reaching net zero emissions by 2050. One of the most important technologies that can help us reach that goal is carbon capture, utilization, and storage. While the tech isn't quite up to the task yet, the potential is there as the world's capacity for storing CO2 far exceeds what is required to reach net zero. The trick is finding the balance between reduced carbon intensity and removing the carbon already in the atmosphere. And as you can see in this quote from the IEA, reaching those net zero goals will be virtually impossible without CCUS. So here's some stats you may already know, but they're worth repeating as we try to minimize water usage in the industry. It takes about 10 barrels of water to produce 1 barrel of oil, and about 2.5 billion gallons of produced water are extracted every day from all types of oil and gas wells. If treated, this could be reused for things like agriculture, but less than 1% of that produced water is currently being reused outside the field. Of course, a big issue is that most of the water used in oil and gas production is freshwater, which is a very small proportion of the water available on Earth. Could we be using saltwater? Yes, but that has its challenges with high salinity and fluid compatibility, and Interface has been doing some work in this area, which Jelaine will cover for us shortly. The last issue we want to touch on is chemical usage. Interface recently published an article about the use of quote-unquote forever chemicals and their impact on the environment. As the average fracturing operation can take anywhere from 80 to more than 300 tons of chemicals, cutting down on their use could not only be environmentally efficient, but also fiscally responsible. Interface is working to optimize chemistries for friction reducers, breakers, surfactants, solvents, cross-linkers, and more. We do all of this on a client-by-client basis, so every test run is unique to our clients' specific situations. And with that, I will turn it over to Jelaine.
Great, thank you so much for the introduction, Lee. So I'll be walking you through how Interface's technology helps you meet ESG goals. through more efficient use of water, chemicals, and of course, time and money. I'll be talking about our flowback or fracturing fluid optimization technology, as well as polymer flooding, steam solvent SAGD, MMP, and foam flooding. So Interface's fracturing fluid performance optimization, or flowback as we call it, provides you with the data required to make strategic cost savings, completions decisions that ultimately help increase hydrocarbon recovery. Our screening methodology uses reservoir analogs in place of core that are fabricated to represent your reservoir parameters, including surface wettability and pore throat size. The reservoir analogs are then saturated with your oil and your water to ensure that they further reflect your specific well properties. Flowback is run at reservoir conditions, including temperature, pressure, and pore scale fluid flow rates. So last year, Interface Fluidics worked with Primex Energy Partners. They're an operator in the southern Delaware Basin of West Texas. So Interface worked with them and we evaluated 7 chemistries from 5 different vendors. We did this at 2 different concentrations, and we also looked at the impact of surfactant performance in freshwater compared to produced water applications. So in less than a month, Interface was able to clearly identify the top performer, which you can see here is P4. So this not only helped Primex to decide what they were going to do next, but it helped them switch from a lower producing chemistry. Beyond that, we also looked at the surfactant at a reduced concentration. And interestingly, we found that the chemistry performed better at 0.5 GPT compared to 1.5 GPT. So this reduction in surfactant not only saved over 50% in chemical costs, but for this one well alone, it also eliminated 35 tons of CO2. So we then went on and looked at the surfactant's viability for produced water applications. And of course, these surfactants were selected based on a good salt tolerance, but what we did find is that P4 performed well across all cases. So the low concentration P4 sample performed the best in both the freshwater and the produced water application. Primex then went on to apply these changes in a sister well in the field. And the field results demonstrated that the 300% reduction in chemistry did not hinder production. So they actually saw a 6.5 increase in production, which of course we can't claim, but we can say that they saved over 50% in chemical costs, reduced their CO2 emissions due to the surfactant savings, and did not hinder their production. Oh, technical challenges. So another area that Interface has worked extensively in is in the area of polymer flooding. So the video on the right are from Interface's work in what we call the world's largest microfluidic device. The red represents oil, and blue is water, and green is the polymer, which is on the bottom slide. So polymer flooding is a proven technology helping increase recovery factors by up to 20% over water flooding. The addition of polymer reduces the amount of fresh water that's required, as well as lowering greenhouse gas emissions and CO2 by 300 to 600% per barrel. So this reduction is primarily achieved through a more efficient sweep of oil within the reservoir. This results in a water cut reduction, decreases the amount of pumping energy required, and is less taxing on the fluid separation equipment and processes. Another area that Interface works extensively in, and is actually the foundation of our company, is in the thermal solvent space. So with Interface's thermal solvent test, we also use a reservoir analog in place of core in a test that's similar to a sand pack. The reservoir analog is filled with water and then saturated with bitumen to establish the initial saturations. Testing is conducted under controlled conditions, including steam temperatures and pressures. And then what's unique about this is that our optical access enables first of its kind visual insights into asphaltene deposition, steam chamber growth, steam to oil ratio, all at the pore scale. So we've also developed a technology to evaluate the residual solvent in this solvent-assisted SAGD processes. But I'm just going to back up for a moment and talk about why would you even want to use solvent in your SAGD process from the perspective of ESG. So adding solvents to steam reduces the amount of water that is needed. This in turn reduces the emissions involved with generating steam and can actually reduce the emissions per barrel by 25%. But an important part of making solvent-assisted SAGD economically and environmentally viable is understanding how much solvent in the reservoir is retained and how much can be recycled. So this SA-SAGD designs include recycling and recovery of the solvent so that it's not lost. And it's designed to recycle injected solvent once it returns to the surface in the produced emulsion. So Interface's SA-SAGD screening not only helps you choose the right solvent and optimize the concentration of solvent, but we also help quantify solvent retention and show you the mechanisms behind how things work. Our SAGD testing can also be used to identify alkaline additives or non-condensable gases to supplement the steam stream. All right, so let's move on to CCUS. Another area that Interface is working on is in the area of CCUS, or carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So this is not a new idea in the oil and gas industry, and it's long been used to enhance oil recovery from a reservoir. Historically, CO2 injection has been viewed from an economic perspective with the benefit of recovering more oil. But today, utilization and storage of CO2 in a reservoir is quickly becoming climate imperative, and sequestering CO2 has become a priority in light of climate change. So to employ CCUS operations, you of course must understand how CO2 and fluids interact in your reservoir and measure conditions that inform models and de-risk operations. So that's obviously an essential part of employing CCUS. So why is this a challenge? So the practical deployment of CCUS rarely or never involves the use of pure CO2. So industrial CO2 streams have impurities, and you have to understand how those specific compositions interact in the reservoir. CCUS operations also use different additives to improve parameters like injectivity, which can change fluid behavior. Ultimately, CCUS is a very complex process that involves complex mixtures under high temperature, high pressure conditions that are reservoir specific. So the current deployment of CCUS in the industry is a challenge because of lack of relevant, accessible data. One of those parameters is minimum miscibility pressure, which is the key piece in understanding gas injection into a reservoir. So with Equinor, Interface actually developed a microfluidic device and testing methodology to replace the standard slim tube. The results were validated against slim tube data for 3 live oil samples and gas mixtures, and the results were within 2.8% of traditional methods. So you can see the graph there on the screen showing the work that we were doing with MMP. All right, so by employing microfluidics, Interface is able to deliver accurate MMP results in 5% of the time of traditional tests. We also reduce the sample volume needed by 99%, remove the need for interpolation, and reduce costs by over 50%. So the video that I just played is an example of MMP in a miscible case. The oil appears white in the video, and you can see the miscibility develop over the course of injection. So another area in which Interface's technology is being applied is in the area of foam flooding. Foam flooding is used in enhanced soil recovery and is being investigated as a method of carbon sequestration. The use of CO2 foams trap carbon, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Studies have shown that incorporating CO2 EOR into CCUS systems results in lower environmental impact and higher thermodynamic efficiency compared to operations that don't use foam flooding. Foams have also been shown to be effective in low pressures, which reduces compression costs and improves the efficiencies of the process. So Interface's foam screening capabilities can help you make formulation decisions quicker, while reducing the amount of sample needed to only a few milliliters. We actually published a paper recently in collaboration with Aramco Services that demonstrates Interface's technology for screening CO2 foam formulations at high temperatures and high pressures. So we actually looked at 6 potential foam formulations, and they were tested with CO2 at different conditions and qualities through the measurement of pressure drop and the resulting mobility reduction factor. We also looked at bright field microscopy combined with our in-house algorithm to visualize the foam, count the foam lamellae, and determine the foam half-life. So the results that we showed from microfluidic testing in this paper were also compared to widely accepted bulk foam testing. Right, so ultimately, Interface's microfluidic technology helps you reach your ESG goals by increasing efficiency, reducing freshwater and chemical use, and giving you CCUS reservoir insights. We also greatly reduce the amount of samples that we're working with. So smaller sample size means more energy efficient collection and shipping of samples to our laboratory. There are also health and safety and environmental benefits through minimizing potential exposure that can affect our clients as well as our team. And we also see more efficient handling and storing of chemicals in our lab. So with that, I'll open up the floor for questions and Lee can feed them over.
All right, so we do have a question from John, and that he's observed that there is circumstantial evidence that produced water can lead to better wells in the Montney, particularly those in areas with lower initial water saturation. Is that something you've heard about or can speak to?
So I can speak to that just based on the results that we saw in the Primex case study. So while I can't speak for all wells or all reservoirs, we did see with the Primex results that the oil recovery was increased in the produced water application. So of course, there are many factors at play, but based on the testing that we've done, we do see potential for increased recovery with produced water.
Okay. And what's the turnaround time on sample collection, shipping, testing, and results reporting?
So of course, that varies depending on what application you're looking at, whether it's Flowback or MMP. So just to give you some idea, typically our testing turnaround is about 1 to 2 days, depending on what application you're looking at. So once the samples actually arrive in the laboratory, we're able to turn around a full suite of testing in a few weeks.
Okay, and just a couple more here. We've gotten through the Q&A. What are your temperature and pressure limitations?
All right, so this also depends on the application, but our pressure limits are always increasing. We'll actually have a webinar on that next month. So if you're interested in the groundbreaking work that we're doing for pressure, I would encourage you to check in on that. I'm sure Lee will be posting about that soon. But essentially, our current commercial pressure limitations are up around 7,000 PSI. In development, we've reached over 10,000 PSI. As well, in the next, I'd say 9 to 18 months, we're looking to increase that limit above 15,000 PSI. So really being able to access more and more reservoirs. And then our temperature Capabilities are up to 400 degrees Fahrenheit.
Great. Yeah, as Jillian said, stay tuned next month for more info about our pressure capabilities there. And one last question, what is the scale of interfaces testing device in comparison to a slim tube or core flood device? So what would the sample sizes look like?
Right, so apart from our SAG-D analog, which is slightly different than the others, most of our microfluidic devices fit on about a 1 centimeter by 2 centimeter microfluidic device, or about the size of a quarter. So in comparison, if you look at our microfluidic device for MMP, for example, we have the length of 24 centimeters all squished onto that microfluidic device, compared to a standard slim tube test, which could be, a 1.5 inch diameter tube that ranges from 5 meters to 20 meters. So there's definitely a substantial difference in the scale of the tests. And this correlates with the sample size that we require. So per test, we're on the order of microliters per measurement, whereas standard tests are anywhere from milliliters to liters of samples required.
Yeah, that's great. So no more questions in the chat, but as always, if you have any further questions or just want to get in touch with us, feel free to email us at webinar@interfacefluidics.com. And thank you for joining us here today.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.